evening, good evening, good evening. Hello, 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 hello. As you can tell, a little bit of a setup change. I'm just trying something new. Let me know how you guys feel about it. But happy Valentine's Day. I hope you had a day full of love and a couple of sweet treats. Maybe you went out to dinner, had a nice date. And if you're spending Valentine's Day alone, have no fear, because I'm here and you can spend some time with me tonight. But I just want to kind of put out there that there's no shame in being alone on Valentine's Day. I know that as a society, we tend to glorify this concept of being in a relationship and needing a partner, and that's almost our purpose in life, but I don't think that that's always the case, and that there can be some beauty in being single and not needing anyone and just growing that relationship with yourself. So if that is you this Valentine's Day, do not be afraid or ashamed. Love will come into your life. You just have to trust the process and treat yourself, grow, enjoy the moment, because there's a lot of beauty and happiness that can be found in being single. So, and if all of that is just not possible right now for you, which is also very realistic, at least you get to spend some time with me tonight and help cure those Valentine's Day blues. But in the spirit of Valentine's Day, I thought that it would be fun to read to you guys some quotes from just some couples that I love in literature. Unfortunately, I do not have my whole source of books here with me at school, but I do have two that I'm going to read from, and depending on how much time we have, I might pull from one more. But yeah, so we will start off with Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas, and then we will move over to Queen of Shadows. These are both from the Throne of Glass series, and if we have time, I might read to you some excerpts from ACOTAR and A Court of Mist and Fury, but it's only if we have extra time. I would hate to make this video terribly long, but if you guys are into that and want a longer video, let me know. I'm open to your suggestions, and I just like to make something that you guys enjoy. So, nonetheless, let's get started reading about some of my favorite couples. And one more thing, if you have not read ACOTAR or Throne of Glass, or if you have not finished it, this is your gentle warning about spoilers. I would hate to spoil these books for you. So, listen at your own discretion, watch at your own discretion. You have been warned. But if you don't care, or you're here for the vibes, then let's begin. Let's start off with Heir of Fire. I know that the pink one is where I need to go, and I'm trying to figure out how much context I want to give to you guys. That seems good. Let's start here. When my mate died, it took me a very, very long time to come back. It took her a moment to think of say, how long ago? 203 years, 27 days ago, he gestured to the tattoo on his face, neck, and arm. This tells the story of how it happened, of the shame I'll carry until my last breath. The warrior who had come the other day had such hollow eyes. Others come to you and have their own grief and shame tattooed on them. Gabriel lost 3 of his soldiers in an ambush in the southern mountains. They were slaughtered. He survived. For as long as he's been a warrior, he's tattooed himself with the names of those under his command to have fallen. But where the blame lies has little to do with the point of the markings. Were you to blame? Slowly he turned, not all the way, but enough to give her a sidelong glance. Yes, when I was young, I was ferocious in my efforts to win valor for myself and my bloodline. Wherever Maeve sent me on campaigns, I went. Along the way, I meted a female of her race, Lyria. He said almost reverently. She sold flowers in the market in Dornell. Maeve disapproved, but when you meet your mate, there's nothing you can do to alter it. She was mine, and no one could tell me otherwise. Mating her cost me Maeve's favor, and I still yearned so badly to prove myself. So when war came calling, and Maeve offered me a chance to redeem myself, I took it. Lyria begged me not to go, but I was so arrogant, so misguided, that I left her at her mountain home and went off to war. I left her alone. He said, and again he looked at Selena. You left me, she had said to him. That was when he'd snapped, the wounds of centuries ago rising up to swallow him as viciously as her own past consumed her. I was gone for months, winning all the glory I so foolishly sought, and then we got word that our enemies had been secretly trying to gain entrance to Dornell through the mountain passes. Her stomach dropped to her feet. Rowan ran a hand through his hair, scratched at his face. I flew home as fast as I'd ever flown. When I got there, I found that she'd been with child. They had slaughtered her anyway and burned our house to cinders. When you lose your mate, you don't. A shake of his head. I lost all sense of myself, of time and place. I hunted them down, all the males who hurt her. I took a long while killing them. She was pregnant, had been pregnant since I'd left her, but I'd been so enamored with my own foolish agenda that I hadn't sent it on her. I left my pregnant wife alone. Her voice broke, but she managed to say, What did you do after you killed them? His face was stark and his eyes focused on some far-off sight. For 10 years, I did nothing. I vanished. I went mad. Beyond mad, I felt. I felt nothing at all. I just left. I wandered the world in and out of my forms, hardly marking the seasons, eating only when my hawk told me it needed to feed or it would die. I would have let myself die, except I couldn't bring myself. He trailed off and cleared his throat. I might have stayed that way forever, but Maeve tracked me down. She said it was enough time spent in mourning and that I was to serve her as prince and commander, to work with a handful of other warriors to protect the realm. It was the first time I had spoken to anyone since that day I found Lyria, the first time I'd heard my name or even remembered it. So you went with her? I had nothing, no one. At that point, I'd hoped serving her might get me killed, and then I could go see Lyria again. So when I returned to Dornell, I wrote the story of my shame on my flesh, and then I bound myself to Maeve with the blood oath, and have served her ever since. How did you come back from that kind of loss? I didn't. For a long while, I couldn't. I think I'm still not back. I might never be. She nodded, lips pressed tight. I glanced towards the window. But maybe, he said, quietly enough that she looked at him again. He didn't smile, but positive. Maybe we could find a way back together. He would not apologize for today or yesterday or for any of it, and she would not ask him to. Not now that she understood. In the weeks she had been looking at him, it had been like gazing into a reflection. No wonder she had loathed him. I think, she said, barely more than a whisper, I would like that very much. He held out a hand. Together, then. She studied the scarred, callous palm, then the tattooed face, full of grim sort of hope. Someone who did understand what it was like to be crippled at your very core. Someone who was still climbing inch by inch out of that abyss. Perhaps they would never get out of it. Perhaps they would never be whole again, but together, she said, and took his outstretched hand, and somewhere far and deep inside of her, an ember began to glow. So that is Air of Fire, just a little excerpt of it. I adore that book so much. I just love the character development in it. It's just so beautiful, and I relate to Aelin so much in her story, so it just really touched my heart reading about her and Rowan. Anyways, now that we've read Air of Fire, let's read an excerpt from Queen of Shadows. And for this one, I'm going to bring up my volume just a little bit to a soft-spoken sort of style to switch things up, and let me know how you guys feel about it, okay? Let's begin. The ancient, cruel demon squatting inside of him began thrashing as the white-haired witch sauntered up to him. It had been content to sneer from afar. One of us, one of ours, it is to him. We made it, so we'll take it. Every step closer made her unbound hair shimmer like moonlight on water. But the demon had began scrambling away as the sun lit up her eyes. Not too close, it said. Do not let the witchling too close. The eyes of the Fall Kings. Hello, princeling, she said, her voice bedroom soft and full of glorious depth. Hello, witchling, he said. The words were his own. For a moment he was so stunned that he blinked. He blinked. The demon inside of him recoiled, clawing at the walls of his mind. Eyes of the Fall Kings, eyes of our masters, it shrieked. Do not touch that one. Is there a reason you're smiling at me? She said. Or shall I interpret it as a death wish? Do not speak to it. He didn't care. Let this be another dream, another nightmare. Let this new, lovely monster devour him whole. He had nothing beyond here and now. Do I need a reason to smile at a beautiful woman? I am not a woman. Her iron nails glinted as she crossed her arms. And you, she sniffed. Man or demon? Prince, he said. That's what the thing inside of him was. He had never learned its name. Do not speak to it. He cocked his head. I have never been with a witch before. Let her rip out his throat for that. End it. A row of iron fangs snapped down over her teeth as her smile grew. I've been with plenty of men. You're all the same. Taste the same. She looked him over as if he were her next meal. I dare you, he managed to say. Her eyes narrowed, the gold like living embers. He'd never seen anyone so beautiful. This witch had been crafted from the darkness between the stars. I think not, Prince, she said in her midnight voice. She sniffed again, her nose crinkling slightly. But would you bleed red or black? I'll bleed whatever color you tell me to. Step away, step away. The demon prince inside of him yanked so hard that he took a step, but not away, towards the white-haired witch. She let out a low, vicious laugh. "What's your name, Prince?" His name? He didn't know what that was. She reached out, her iron nails glimmering in the dappled sunlight. The demon screaming was so loud in his head that he wondered if his ears would bleed. Iron clinked against the stone as she grazed the collar around his neck. Higher, if she just slashed higher. "Like a dog," she murmured, "leash to your master." She ran a finger along the curve of the collar, and he shuddered, in fear, in pleasure, in anticipation of the nails tearing into his throat. "What's your name?" A command, not a question, as eyes of pure gold met his. "Dorian," he breathed. "Your name is nothing. Your name is mine," the demon hissed, and a wave of that human woman's screaming swept him away. Crouched in the brush just 20 feet from the prison wagon, Aelin froze. Dorian. It couldn't have been. There wasn't a chance of it. Not when the voice that Dorian had spoken with was so empty, so hollow, but... Beside her, Kale's eyes were wide. Had he heard the slight shift? The wing leader cocked her head, her iron-tipped hand still touching the wordstone collar. "Do you want me to kill you, Dorian?" Aelin's blood went cold. Kale tensed, his hand going to his sword. Aelin gripped the back of his tunic in silent reminder. She had no doubt that across the clearing, Nestrin's arrow was already pointed with lethal accuracy at the wing leader's throat. "I want you to do lots of things to me," the prince said, raking his eyes along the witch's body. The humanity gone again, she imagined it, the way the king had acted. That was a man who held pure control over his son, confident that there was no struggle inside. A soft, joyless laugh, and then the wing leader released Dorian's collar. Her red cloak flowed around her on a phantom wind as she stepped back. "Come find me again, Prince, and we'll see about that." A vague prince inhabited Dorian, but Aelin's nose did not bleed in its presence. There was no creeping fog of darkness. Had the king muted its powers so his son could deceive the world around him? Or was that battle still being raged inside the prince's mind? Alright, my friends. I've decided that I will read one excerpt from the Akatar book just because I love this scene so much. You only really appreciate it after you read the whole series, but it's just so fun. So, since I don't have the physical copy, I'm going to grab the PDF of it really quickly. Give me 1 second. Alright, my dears, here's our last one. And this one's very popular, so, well, they all are, but I'm sure that you might have seen a TikTok of this. But nonetheless, it's so good. Here we go. Whatever was occurring inside of the cave, or whatever was about to happen, was the focus of the shadowy fairies as they lined either side of the long path leading to it. The path wended between the trenches among the hills, and the high fae swayed in place, moving to the rhythm of the drumming, whose beats sounded in my stomach. I watched them sway and then shifted on my feet. I'd been banned from this? I scanned the firelit area, trying to peer through the veil of night and smoke. I found nothing of interest, and none of the masked fairies paid me any heed. They remained along the path, more and more of them coming each minute. Something was definitely about to happen, whatever this great rite was. I made my way back up the hillside, and stood along the edge of a bonfire near the trees, watching the fairies. I was about to work up the courage to ask a lesser fairy who passed by, a bird-masked servant, like Alice, What sort of ritual was going to happen when someone grasped my arm and whirled me around? I blinked at the three strangers, dumbfounded as I beheld their sharp-featured faces, free of masks. They looked like high fae, but there was something slightly different about them, something taller and leaner than Tamlin or Lucian, something crueler in their pitch-black, depthless eyes. Fairy sun. The one grasping my arm smiled down at me, revealing slightly pointed teeth. "Human woman," he murmured, running an eye over me. "We've not seen one of you for a while." I tried yanking my arm back, but he held my elbow firm. "What do you want?" I demanded, keeping my voice steady and cold. The two fairies who flanked him smiled at me. One grabbed my other arm, just as I went for my knife. "Just some fire night fun," one of them said, reaching out a pale, too long hand to brush back a lock of my hair. I twisted my head away and tried to step out of his touch, but he held firm. None of the fairies near the bonfire reacted. No one even bothered to look. If I cried for help, would someone answer? Would Tamlin answer? I couldn't be that lucky again. I'd probably used up all my allotted portion of luck with the Naga. I yanked my arm in earnest. Their grip tightened around till it hurt. They kept my hands well away from my knives. 3 of them stepped closer, sealing me off from the others. I glanced around, looking for any ally. There were more non-masked fairies here now. The 3 fairies chuckled, a low, hissing noise that ran along my body. I hadn't realized how far I stood from everyone else, how close I'd come to the forest edge. "Leave me alone," I said, louder and angrier than I had expected, given the shaking that was starting in my knees. "Bold statement from a human on Calamai," said the one holding my left arm. The fire didn't reflect in his eyes. It was as if they gobbled up the light. I thought of the Naga, whose horrible exteriors matched their rotten hearts. Somehow, these beautiful, ethereal fairies were far worse. Once the rites performed, we'll have some fun, won't we? A treat, such a treat, to find a human woman here. I bared my teeth at him. "Get your hands off me," I said, loud enough for anyone to hear. One of them ran a hand down my side, its bony fingers digging into my ribs, my hips. I jerked back, only to slam into the third one, who wove his long fingers through my hair and pressed close. No one looked. No one noticed. "Stop it," I said. The words came out in a strangled gasp as they began hurting me towards the line of trees, towards the darkness. I pushed and thrashed against them. They only hissed. One of them shoved me and I staggered, falling out of their grasp. The ground welled up beneath me, and I reached for my knives, but sturdy hands grasped me under the shoulders before I could draw them or hit the grass. They were strong hands, warm and broad, not at all like the prodding, bony fingers of the 3 fairies, who went utterly still as whoever caught me gently set me upright. "There you are. I've been looking for you," said a deep, sensual voice I'd never heard. But I kept my eyes on the 3 fairies, bracing myself for a fight as the male behind me stepped up to my side and slipped a casual arm around my shoulders. The 3 lesser fairies paled, their dark eyes wide. "Thank you for finding her for me," my savior said to them, smooth and polished. "Enjoy the rite?" There was enough of a bite beneath his last words that the fairies stiffened. Without further comment, they scuttled back to the bonfires. I stepped out of the shelter of my savior's arms and turned to thank him. Standing before me was the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. Everything about the stranger radiated sensual grace and ease, high fae no doubt. His short black hair glimmered like a raven's feathers, offsetting his pale skin and his blue eyes, so deep that they were violet, even in the firelight. They twinkled with amusement as he beheld me. For a moment we said nothing. "Thank you" didn't seem to cover what he'd done for me, but something about the way he stood with absolute stillness, the night seeming to press in closer around him, made me hesitate to speak. made me want to run in the other direction. He too wasn't wearing a mask from another court then. A half smile played on his lips. What's a mortal woman doing here on fire night? His voice was a lover's purr that sent shivers through me, caressing every muscle and bone and nerve. I took a step back. My friends brought me. The drumming was increasing in tempo, building to a climax I didn't understand. It had been so long since I'd seen a bare face that looked even vaguely human. His clothes, all black and finely made, were cut close enough to his body that I could see how magnificent he was, as if he had been molded from the night itself. And who were your friends? He was still smiling at me, a predator sizing up prey. 2 ladies, I lied again. Their names? He prowled closer, slipping his hands into his pockets. I retreated a little more and kept my mouth shut. Had I just traded 3 monsters for something far worse? When it became apparent that I wouldn't answer, he chuckled. You're welcome, he said, for saving you. I bristled at his arrogance, but retreated another step. I was close enough to the bonfire, to the little hollow where the fairies were all gathered, that I could make it if I sprinted. Maybe someone would take pity on me, maybe Lucien or Alice if they were there. Strange for a mortal to be friends with 2 fairies, he mused, and began circling me. I could have sworn tendrils of star-kissed night trailed in his wake. Aren't humans usually terrified of us? Aren't you, for that matter, supposed to keep to your side of the wall? I was terrified of him, but I wasn't able to let him know. I've known them for my whole life. I've never had anything to fear from them. He paused his circling. He now stood between me and the bonfire and my escape route. And yet they brought you to the Great Rite and abandoned you. They went to get refreshments, I said, and his smile grew. Whatever I'd said had given me away. I'd spotted the servants hauling off the food, but maybe it wasn't here? He smiled for a heartbeat longer. I'd never seen anyone so handsome, and never had so many warning bells pealed in my head because of it. I'm afraid the refreshments are a long way off, he said, coming closer now. It might be a while before they return. May I escort you somewhere in the meantime? He removed a hand from his pocket to offer me his arm. He'd been able to scare off those fairies without lifting a finger. No, I said, my tongue thick and heavy. He waved his hand towards the hollow, towards the drums. Enjoy the rite, then. Try to stay out of trouble. His eyes gleamed in a way that suggested staying out of trouble meant staying far, far away from him. Though it might have been the biggest risk I'd ever taken, I blurted, So, you're not a part of the spring court? He returned to me, every moment exquisite and laced with lethal power, but I held my ground as he gave me a lazy smile. Do I look like I'm a part of the spring court? The words were tinged with arrogance that only an immortal could achieve. He laughed under his breath. No, I'm not a part of the noble spring court, and glad of it. He gestured to his face where the mask might go. I should have walked away, should have kept my mouth shut, but why are you here then? The man's remarkable eyes seemed to glow, with enough of a deadly edge that I backed up a step. Because all of the monsters have been let out of their cages tonight, no matter what court they belong to, so I may roam wherever I wish until the dawn. More riddles and questions to be answered, but I had enough, especially as his smile turned cold and cruel. Enjoy the rite, I repeated as blandly as I could. I hurried back to the hollow, too aware of the fact that I was putting my back to him. I was grateful to lose myself in the crowd, milling along the path to the cave, still waiting for some moment to occur.